Hello everyone, this is Kelly and I'd like to welcome you to the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel and day one of our Vintage Love release. Make sure you check out the description box below for all the details. I'm very excited to share with all of our friends a brand new set of Lovely Layers birds, and these are the Lovely Layers Lovebirds. So there are two little lovebirds. You can see here I've got them all layered together and ink blended. You can see I've done the eyes just a little bit different. I've done one with kind of an open eye and the other one closed, like it's all nestled in together. These layer together beautifully. They have so much great embossed detail. When you run your paper through your die machine, there are the little beaks, the feet, the little wings, all the little feathers and things in the chest. They're just so sweet when they're all put together. Now, to go along with our sweet little lovebirds, there's also a Lovely Layers bird cage, and this makes the most beautiful kind of vintage looking ornate bird cage. There's also the little die that's going to cut out the kind of the swing that the little bird can sit on, a little perch. Now I've cut this bird cage and you can see all the little pieces there out of gold metallic cardstock and some craft paper, and our little lovebirds just nestle right inside, so you can kind of nestle them inside there. You can put them on the little swing or perch and just have them on the perch by themselves. You can add the perch or the little swing inside your bird cage. So there's lots of different options on how you want to use your birds or the bird cage. The bird cage would even be beautiful by itself on a card, but I can imagine myself using this on the Lovely Layers dogwood branch or the Lovely Layers cherry blossom, kind of having them out in the wild with little blossoms around them. But I am in love with this little set of lovebirds and of course the sweet little Lovely Layers bird cage. To go along with our sweet little lovebirds, we had to have a wonderful sentiment set, and this one is called By Your Side. So we have We're the Perfect Pair, Love is in the Air, To the Lovebirds, I'll Always Be By Your Side, Birds of a Feather, Sending You Love, You Make My Heart Sing, Somebody Loves You, Together is a Beautiful Place to Be. And if I flip this around here, you see We're Meant to Soar, On Your Wedding Day. So lots of beautiful sentiments in a gorgeous font. And of course, there are the coordinating dies that go along with each of those sentiments. So you can cut those out and add those anywhere you need to on your card. Next, I know I say this all the time, but I am really excited to introduce our red rubber stamp. This is our Vintage Flora background stamp. As you know, red rubber is known for its great stamped impressions, and this stamps beautifully. It's got the most beautiful handwriting and like vintage stamp and postmark details with great vintage images of flowers and a little bee and butterfly. I'm going to be sharing this at the end of the video, so I hope that you will stick around with me for that. This is our postmarked stamp and die set. I am in love with this set. I love kind of the vintage travel theme that these images have. So there's the tiny little travel scene of Paris down there with the Eiffel Tower. There's a little cottage. There's florals and a hummingbird. There's vintage handwriting and like wax stamper images. There's old stamps up in the left-hand corner. There's all types of things that you can add to this to make it look like an old piece of mail or a postcard. Now we also have the mini postcard die. It's going to cut the shape around the edges and then press in a lot of great detail. So it's going to press in the postcard words there to the top, plus the location for the stamp and the little lines where you would write your return address. I have these cut here. This is another one that I'm going to be using at the end of this video, but those little scene stamps and all of the little bits and pieces fit onto the little mini postcard. So you can make lots of little vintage looking old postcards You can add flowers, you can add the travel theme, you can add the little cottage, you can even add the old looking stamps and the old like hand stamping that comes from the post office. So I'm going to be using these at the end of the video, like I said, and I am super excited to get started with these. Now we had to have a place for our postcards to go, our little mini postcards. And this is the Vintage Mailbox Card Base die set. It has the most beautiful details that will press into your paper. So here is my little vintage mailbox all put together, and there's two different spots that you can add your mail. So the front door will open. You could even stamp a message inside there or write your message. The little postcards will also slip into the top flap, and you can add all of your little postcards in like that. Now you could make this into a card base by cutting a couple of your mailboxes and adding a hinge. You could glue this directly onto a card base and just have that on the front of your card. Lots of different options with this. And I love this whole mail themed collection. So we have the mini postcard, we have the vintage mailbox die, and then we also have our postmarked stamps and dies. And so all these will all coordinate so beautifully together. So you can use your postmarked stamps, create some beautiful postcards, and then slip those into your vintage mailbox. The mailbox memos stamp and die set are going to coordinate beautifully with all of our postage collection. Now, it has P.S. I love you, happy mail, kindly delivered to, oh happy day, just a little note, handmade happiness, a happy hello, sending love your way, and many more. Now, I am excited about this because this sentiment set, the font is going to perfectly match the font on the front of the vintage mailbox. So if you wanted to make a little mailbox and then stamp and die cut a sentiment, those fonts are going to perfectly match and coordinate with one another. And so I just love how all of this goes so well with one another, and it just makes the most beautiful postage collection. Next is the Lovely Layouts posted die sets. Now this again has a little bit of that postage feel. So the largest A2 size die has that postage stamp feel or cut around the edge. There's a little lacy design that you can add in almost like a ribbon. There's a scrolled, almost frame looking die that you could use on anything. Lots of ways to set up your layout. There's a PDF that's going to be provided on the website that's going to provide lots of ideas for you, but there's a little postage stamp, a half circle with scallops. There's little banners and dies that you can use to stamp your sentiments on, and the sky is the limit here on how you want to arrange or put together different layouts with this die set. Our newest 3D embossing folder is called the Eyelet Lace 3D embossing folder. Now this is A7 size or 5x7, so you can make a big 5x7 card. You can cut down your cardstock and use this on an A2 or a 4¼ by 5½ inch card, but it's going to cut or press that eyelet kind of Swiss dot design in the top of the paper, and then we have the beautiful dotted scallops down below. There's also a die that's going to go with the embossing folder. It's going to come with it as a little bundle. It's going to cut that scalloped edge. You can layer these together and offset them for a really pretty lacy design. You can use it by itself. I have used this on a card that I'll share here in a minute, but here's what it would look like with just some solid colored cardstock underneath. Lots of different ways to use this really pretty and simple 3D embossing folder just to add a little bit of beautiful texture to your backgrounds. Now here is that card that I made using the 3D embossing folder. I've used that as a textured background for some older Lovely Layers florals and the little rattan basket, and you can see the little lacy design there to the bottom. I've used that as the resting place for my little basket of flowers. Next is the Vintage Flourish stencil. Now this is just a one stencil background, so super easy to create resting places for your florals. It would be beautiful to brush on or blend on color and just add a beautiful sentiment, but just a beautiful kind of vintage wallpaper look. Now let's get started on today's card. So I have my Lovely Layouts posted die set here with all of those great dies. I have my mini postcard, of course. I told you I was so excited to pull these out. The postmarked stamp and coordinating die set, the vintage Flora background stamp, that's that beautiful red rubber, and mailbox memos. Now I don't end up using this sentiment set because I just had so much fun with all the other stuff, but I pulled it out just in case. I'm going to start out by creating a couple of old vintage looking postcards. I am cleaning off and really giving that stamp a rub down, and you can see how wonderfully those little stamps fit right into that mini postcard. I have lined that up and I have it in my MISTI, and I am going to selectively ink up parts of this stamp. Now, if you wanted to stamp this in just black, like Copic friendly ink, and then Copic color those, you can do that. I am going to kind of make this kind of messy watercolory looking to go with that whole vintage antique feel. So I am using little finger daubers, and I am inking up first the Eiffel Tower in like a charcoal gray. And next I'm going to take a Tombow marker in blue, and I'm going to ink up the clouds. This is a good way to get some inky coverage on very small little areas, is just to use kind of your little pen markers like that. I wouldn't use a Copic marker, obviously, because you don't want to tear up your stamps or anything like that, but a Tombow marker is a great option for kind of selectively inking up these little tiny areas. Now, once I get the clouds done, I am going to move on to the little buildings or the little cottages that are around. Taking two different colors of green, and it really doesn't matter. You can just have fun with this and ink these up and stamp it down and then ink it up again and stamp it down. That's one great thing about the MISTI, is I can just keep going and keep going until I'm happy with how everything looks. But you can see I've got more of kind of an olivey green on the right side and a lighter green on the left. And then when I'm happy with the way that everything looks, I can kind of move on to the next thing. So there is a few little birds in the sky on this stamp, and I again am going to choose a darker kind of black or really dark gray Tombow marker. That really fine brush tip is going to allow me to get right in there on those little birds, stamp those down, and then those are going to show up over there on my little mini postcard. So I can keep working at it until I get everything just the way I want it. And you know, if some little places kind of bleed over, for example, like the Eiffel Tower legs kind of bleed over into the buildings, that's okay, because I'm going for this whole like vintage watercolory design. So I didn't mind that at all. You could even spritz that with water to make it really messy watercolor, but I decided not to do that. I decided just to stamp it down. Now I'm taking the stamp set without the backer paper, and I am laying the stamps over the top of my mini postcard, just kind of get the lay of the land to decide where I want everything to go, what I want everything to look like. I'm going to take this little like date stamp almost, where it looks like it has been stamped in the post office. I'm going to stamp that down. I like it that it looks messy because that looks, you know, more realistic and like a little postman in the post office has stamped that down. I'm taking one of the old antique stamps. I'm going to ink that up in a different color and stamp that down. And again, I want everything to look kind of rustic and messy. The next thing I'm going to do is add the little stamped lines, like it looks like it came from the post office and was canceled. And now I'm going to start on my next mini postcard. I'm going to set up the little cottage scene, and I'm going to ink it up and do the exact same thing as I did on my little Paris postcard. So I'm using greens and grays, and so everything is going to kind of tie together. and I am just going to use my little finger daubers to add it right on top of that stamp it down, and then wherever I don't like certain areas, I can kind of go back, add color, clean it off, change it up, do whatever I need to do. I could even have taken my little Tombow markers and added little bits and bobs in that way in different colors and different small areas. Next, I'm going to take kind of a pinkish red and stamp one of the vintage stamps. Again, I'm going to stamp the little canceled stamp stripes over the top. And then this time I'm going to add the cute little special delivery stamp on top of that little postcard. And then this one is all finished. I'm going to leave it just as is. So here's my little postcard pair. They look like someone has traveled and collected little postcards. Using the Lovely Layouts die set, I'm going to create a little background for my postcards to rest on. So I'm going to use the A2 size die with some new pattern paper. You can see that little postage stamp edge on it. And then I use the die that looks like it's a scrolled frame or something like that. I've cut that out of craft, and then I'm just kind of getting the lay of the land here on how I'm going to add everything together. But I'm going to use our new red rubber vintage flora stamp to stamp onto that craft cardstock. So I have pulled the inside mat, that black mat. You can see that this is my very first Misty. It is well loved and well used, and I have taken that mat out of that, and I've set my craft cardstock down in there, gotten that red rubber stamp to stick to the lid, and I am using old paper to ink up this stamp. Now I'm going to show you this boo-boo. When I stamp this kind of greenish ink onto the craft cardstock, it does not give me the effect that I was going for. And I just am leaving this in here for you to see. I'm going to give that some love with a little rub down with my pressure tool, open that up, and you can see not really much going on there. So I am going to take the Gathered Twigs Distress Oxide ink, which is a lighter shade of brown. It's my favorite shade of brown oxide ink to use. And I'm going to ink that stamp up with the brown, and that's going to look so much better. You're going to be able to see all of the great details in that vintage Flora red rubber stamp. And I love this. I'm going to get that really nice and juicy and make sure I have really good coverage of that. And then again, I'm going to press over that with my pressure tool to make sure that that red rubber makes contact with all that paper. Look how gorgeous that is. If there's any little light pieces, I can just stamp that back down, take that back out, and now I've got some vintage looking paper that's going to be beautiful with my little mini postcards. Now I'm taking the dies that create the little stamp, and again, that's from that Lovely Layouts die set. I'm using some gold wax melts and our new Fleur de Lis wax stamper. Now I'm going to share more about the new wax and the wax stampers in a later video, but I wanted to use this pretty wax stamper on my vintage card. So I've let that set up, and you can see how this is raised like 3D. So we've got some new wax stampers coming out. They're really cool, and several of them have that 3D look to it that's raised up. Now I'm adding some ink blending to the edges of my mini postcards to kind of distress those and make them look even older, and just using my Gathered Twigs blending brush to go over the edges of that. Another thing that I did before I attached these to the card was I took the edges of those postcards and I kind of bent them up and kind of crinkled the edges a little bit to make them look like they've been collected and gathered over time and things like that. I can take my liquid adhesive and add down my vintage Flora design. And now I'm going to take my postcards and kind of get the lay of the land here, see how I want everything set up. Now I have a little collection of vintage lace, and I'm going to add this into the design. It almost looks like they've been tied together, or it kind of mimics the look of a group of postcards or letters being tied together. That's what I'm going to tell myself in my crafty brain, at least. You can see here, that's where I went through and kind of bent up the edges. Now I'm going to cheat with this vintage lace. I'm going to wrap it around the edges and just use my highlighter tape. You could use, good old clear tape or double-sided tape or whatever you have to tape that down. Nobody's going to see it on the other side of the card. I'm going to take that lacy piece that is in the Lovely Layouts die set. I'm going to add that right over the top. I like that white. That is going to tie in with the white card base that I add this whole background onto. And then I'm going to glue down this, as I mentioned before, right down on a white card base. After I get that glue set and everything set up and my little lacy die cut is all nicely dried, I can trim off the edges, and this is so cute. Now I'm going to add that little stamp that has the fleur-de-lis. I can't leave this alone. I'm going to add a little messy vintage looking bow on here. I love how this is all just kind of coming together, but that's just dyed seam binding that I've tied like a little double bow out of, and I'm kind of ruffling up the edges and the tails and the little loops. I'm going to add this onto the corner there with a little bit of our liquid adhesive. I like to hold everything down with my finger, let that glue attach. You could use your tweezers or whatever you want to kind of hold that into place. And then once I get my ribbon down, now I can add my little wax seal that is poured onto that little stamp die cut. So I'm just going to add a good dollop of adhesive there because I want to get that down into the ribbons and things of my little bow that I have going on. Now, I could have added a sentiment. This is where I could have taken the sentiments from the mailbox memos, added something like that. I think I'll wait and add a sentiment to the inside, but I love the kind of rustic, vintage, kind of collected over time feel of that card. I just love the new wax stamper that has that 3D fleur-de-lis, and then of course our red rubber and our mini postcards and all the pretty things. And that's it for day one of the Vintage Love release. Make sure you check out the description box below for all the information on our release party. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.